In today's episode, we speak with Andrea Kayal. She is the Chief Revenue Officer at a 200-person company called HelpScout. She also runs the CMO School at Pavilion. We spent a lot of time talking about how she went from VP to C-level. We also talk about all the things that are most important to her when she's looking for a new job. I think that'll be really insightful for anyone else that's on the job hunt right now. Andrea also shared what it's like inside a board meeting. This is something that not a lot of people get exposure to, so I think that was really cool to hear. And we jump into the scrappy things they've been doing at HelpScout that you might be able to steal for your own company. If you get just a little bit of value from this, the best thing you can do is forward it to a friend, hit the like button, or give us a positive review on Spotify or Apple. I hope you enjoy the episode. All right. Well, today I am joined by Andrea Kayal. She is the Chief Revenue Officer at HelpScout, it's a Series B company that's got about 200 employees that specialize in customer support and communication. Previous to that, she was a CRO at TeamPay, the CMO at Electric through some really explosive growth there. She's been Upserve and the CMO at Signpost. There's a bunch of other roles beyond that that we could go on forever. But Andrea, thank you so much for joining today.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me, Jason.
So let's talk about your background here a little bit more. Of all these different roles that you've had, was there one that you can point to that was the most transformative for your career?
They all added bits and pieces, I think, along the way. I think this is they help me understand which mistakes I didn't want to make in every subsequent role. But I think the one that was most transformative was the one at Ups. I was there just under 2 years, but that point in my career, I had previously been working, truly just at, VC-backed companies. Following that, I've stayed in VC-backed companies, but this is the PE experience. And Vista had acquired Upserve just before I joined. And so still felt like a VC culture, but it definitely was transforming into the sort of the PE-backed culture that they are, that they're interested in kind of producing when they purchase companies. And so that was kind of because it helped level up my acumen in a different way, my business acumen, just a different kind of role. We were not growing at all costs. We were trying to see, how we could do more with less. And actually that's the environment we're all in right now. But it was very transformational in terms of how you needed to operate as sort of an operator in a particular function. So I was very thankful for that experience.
So let's unpack that a little bit more. I think let's start for a second. Explain the difference in being in a PE-backed company versus a VC-backed company, and maybe start with kind of the incentives of those investors.
Yeah, primarily has to do with, two things. I think both the size of company you're at and the investor you have backing that company you could have wildly different experiences. You're Series A and you're trying to just grow and learn and get product market fit. Definitely a different job. There's more leniency for making mistakes, not making mistakes and you can't live with the mistakes, but you are, you really don't have a lot of answers in terms of what predictable growth look like. And do you need to do it efficiently? VC is also more tolerant, in my experience, with spending more to see the growth. Again, I think we got into a little bit of a problem in the last couple of years with too much spend happening and not enough growth happening. But generally, that's kind of the vibe. At PE, EBITDA, for example, is something that they're looking to achieve, EBITDA positive. So they want to see you really marching towards profitability. And so you can do that because you're growing more, but they usually don't care that you're not growing at 50 or 100%. They're usually good with 20 or 30%. And, but that you can see a path to profitability. And that includes really how you're stripping out costs, if you will, just getting more efficient with every spend.
Right. Then in terms of how that was really impactful for you as a marketing leader and an operator, do you remember any kind of those, we talk about growth personally often as step functions and not just this gradual growth curve. So do you remember looking back at any of those step functions oh, wow, now I can really do this thing really well?
Yeah, well, it was the board meeting. Usually the board meeting is a presentation of lagging indicators, but it was, it's a 5-hour board meeting. Each function basically has an hour to present. The marketing slides were 100 deep. And, you needed to, especially with the chairman that we had, the Vista chairman we had overseeing Upserve, who if you did not know a number in the board meeting, it was like a very bad look for you. So just the amount of preparation you needed was obviously like an important part of like being in the board, but it helped you make sure you had like a command of your business that I don't feel like is sort of, I don't know that there's as much rigor in the VC board meetings as there was in the PE board meeting. And so that was sort of like a step function for me where I was like, holy shit. I'm like, this is the difference between like preparing board slides and then like being, the CEO of my own business.
Right, right. And right, you were a college athlete as well. I'm guessing too, similar, like going from high school sports to college sports.
Yeah, I was like, okay, I get it now. It's obviously different. I mean, just and also the level of professionalism they expect. Again, like it's a good analogy between high school and collegiate. Like you could be, rolling into practice with like, your jeans on in high school. You're not doing that when you're at Michigan, for example.
Right, right. And I think too, that is whenever we're in those phases or seasons of our career where someone is asking for true operational excellence from us, it can feel like you're getting beat down all the time. But once you move on to the next thing, it feels like you're swimming downstream.
I didn't say it was my favorite experience. I said it was a transformational experience. Yeah, no, I don't want to operate in an environment like that anymore. I'm 42 and like, I don't know how many more reps I have working in startup, but like, I definitely don't want to feel like, not knowing like a number is like the end of the world. We're not like saving lives over here. We're running a business and care. I cared a lot to make sure I got that experience. I am very happy that I don't need to operate inside of it every day.
Well, I want to stick on this career thread here for a second because I think there's a lot to be made between making jumps in different titles. And certain organizations really treat these roles with scrutiny because they want to give people the proper title. And so, right, particularly at Signpost, right, you were the VP marketing for 2 years before you got promoted to CMO. And I'm curious, was there, in a similar way, how did you evolve, do you think, during those 2 years that got you to the place where you earned that C-level title?
Yeah, I do have to sort of also like attribute that change in title to just a CEO who was open to giving me the opportunity to achieve that. Because to your point, there are a lot of CEOs who do these like really weird things with titles where like you have to check every box like 50 times or have seen that you've done the run the plays before. So I am thankful that he kind of allowed me to do that. And I think one of the reasons that made him feel comfortable doing it were two things. Number one, the scope of responsibility that I ended up assuming while I was there expanded pretty significantly, also to include customer success. So I expanded my scope pretty significantly. So it was customer success, business operations, and it was marketing. Marketing was actually a small function at the time and we weren't spending a ton. We did have a very, very large sales team. So I was able to kind of expand the role there. And then the second thing was, I just had mentioned my Upserve experience. I operated, sort of tried to operate the same way at Signpost, which is, just caring deeply about the numbers and how we were going to get there and proving time and time again that I did what I said I was going to do. If you asked me to improve a customer success number or you asked me to improve marketing metrics, that I really did my best to achieve those. So I think track record of success is the second thing I think that helped.
Yeah. What about the management aspect of actually managing people? How do you think you evolved during those early like VP and C-level titles? Because managing people from the C-level is different than VP and obviously earlier before that. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that kind of evolution.
Totally. Actually, I teach a class on this in CMO School at Pavilion. I'm the dean of CMO School, so like I bring on all these CMOs to like help teach courses for like the CMO leaders in Pavilion. My course is specifically on the role of the CMO, which includes like the jump between VP and C, like what the difference is, which include like how to manage people. I would say that the management aspect isn't so different as it is you're just managing more senior people. You are now managing VPs who have managers, who have whatever directors, who have managers, so like the difference between your levels, I think, grows when you get to C. But I would say there's probably two other things that C level differs from on VP outside of management, which is just foresight. I do think like it's broader than just your role. No longer like just the M, the acronym, or like CRO. The C means that you are like a business leader, you are partner to the CEO, you give him leverage or her leverage, and you're not like a order taker. You don't just care squarely about your function, you become something that's like much more than that. And then I would also say like peripheral vision. So just, being able to see sort of like around the corners and like to the next set of millions you need to generate for the business is are two other like very important skills, I think.
Yeah, I think that that piece of like no matter what your function is at the C level, you become horizontal, right? You have to support everything. And I think the other thing that you mentioned was really understanding the motivations for who you're reporting to. And this is evergreen in any role, but I think more people don't spend enough time thinking deeply about, hey, what does my manager care about a lot? Because that's right, one of the quickest ways to show your value is to show them how much you care and how much value you can provide for what they're being judged on.
It's probably the number one thing. Like you nailed it. Like it's, leverage. Are you able to remove the stressors? I was having a one-on-one with my CEO yesterday and he was talking about some of the fires. Like he was thinking about, I'm like, take those two fires. Those are mine, like get rid of those two fires. The more you can do, especially because C-level is usually reporting into the CEO, to let the CEO do what their new job is, because every time the business moves to a different stage, their job evolves. And usually if you're dealing with a founder, this is the biggest company they've ever worked in. They actually don't know what their job is. So you have to tell them like, do not worry about this. Go worry about giving leverage, I think is like a big one.
Yeah. One other thing on the career aspect for you. So, right, you've been at a handful of high growth companies and venture backed startups now. And I'm curious, I'm sure this has changed for you as your career's evolved, but how have you evaluated each opportunity? What was really important to you in, say, the Upserve role versus what's been important to you in this most recent role? And what's the constants that are always important versus what's changed?
Yeah. I have two constants and then I probably have like 20 variables. I actually have a spreadsheet. I put a LinkedIn post about this. I like share my spreadsheet that I send to companies before I join because I do more diligence probably on the business than like some of the like rounds are getting at this point because and look, I say that coming from a place where I know the job market is hard right now. Like maybe you can't evaluate maybe sometimes you just got to make it work. So I am empathetic to that. But in the event that you have the opportunity to choose the company, the three fixed variables for me that I really use to assess whether or not I'm going to be successful there is first and foremost, is the CEO a jerk? The CEO is a jerk. I'm out. It's not working. I can't work for people who just aren't kind. Like I said, it's just a job. Chill out. Like I understand that there's a lot of stress here. You took a lot of money, but have a cocktail. The second is product market fit. If your churn is high, I squarely assess that on gross retention rate because NDR actually obfuscates issues inside of the product where sales and marketing leaders, that one in particular is a major problem for us because if it's bad in a leaky bucket, the first place boards and CEOs go to cut is sales and marketing. They're like, well, we don't want to grow as much anymore because our churn is shit. And I'm like, okay, that's not my problem. I mean, like, obviously it's my problem, but like not something I feel like I can solve actively day to day. So I would say like for SMBs, you want to make sure that that's over 80%. For enterprise, you want to make sure that that's over 90%. But in the event that like you can really dig in there, I would. And then the third is total addressable market. And in close tie with that is actually service addressable market because, you'll see a lot of board decks that show $18 billion sales opportunity. I'm like, that is not true. And like the real is where the SAM is. It's that what limitations does your product have that prevent us from serving that entire 18 billion? When you get down to it, most TAMs for these tech companies are like $100,000 So sorry for the cursing. You can feel free to edit that. It's just really low. So the reason I care about asking those questions are like, how successful am I going to be if I know that my ability to drive more revenue here is going to be, limited by the total addressable or the service addressable. So those are my three
What's funny is that when you said that about the addressable market, the personal parallel I thought about was when you realize as you're a young adult that your parents are not perfect and they don't have the answers to everything. Because right, as my early years in the startup world, it's like people mention this addressable market. They're like, oh yeah, we can just get like 1% of this addressable market, right? And then over time, you realize like when you have to put together some of these TAM calculations yourself, you're like kind of just making this up and like using very round numbers
Right.
with very large assumptions.
Very large assumptions. And by the way, like even if we can get 1% of it, like that comment is so dangerous because people think it's how easy it is to just go get like 1% of it. It's like, that's a 12 years in the making company. So anyway, but those are the ones that I do a lot of also I do assessment on the economics of a business also that has a lot to do with just simply just understanding things, which are why they're not my non-negotiables, is because I'm usually there to help fix some of the stuff. Like, if CAC payback is like really like it's egregious at like 50 something, like it's years. Okay, well, it's my job to bring it down. So it's okay that it's not great. I bring it down. Or like rule of 40. How negative is it? Like just other things I really want to know. LTV, did company stick around? But I don't like not take a job because some of the metrics are bad. I actually think that's why I'm being hired. So
Do you find yourself when you're asking some of these questions in interview processes where founders either are reluctant to share that or just don't know it?
I actually have not had any founders reluctant to share it. When they share, they're like, listen, 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 it's all getting fixed. It's like it's so bad here, but like, don't worry about, they're selling the crap out of it. And I'm like, by the way, I know how hard it is to change some of these. So like, just stop. So it's not a reluctance. It's like the sugar coating around why it's bad. And again, like if you're selling the job, like I understand. And the only one that usually for earlier stages, like is a little harder to know is LTV because that takes a minute. Like you're maybe not in business 5 years to know if it's 5 years.
Right. And then I guess in terms of the variables, right? If you think about, I'm not sure if you want to pick a role or two in particular, but I'm
Mhm.
curious
Mhm.
about some of the roles that you've taken on these last few roles. What else stuck out as the variables where you're like, okay, this seems like a really strong opportunity?
Okay. So at the very top of the list is gross retention. And I do look at net dollar. I'm like, how easy is it actually for us to sell to more of our customer base? Team pay. I was a customer of Team Pay when I was at Electric, and I took Team Pay because it was a step up opportunity for me. Electric going to 100 million. This was an example of where I hadn't done the 50 to 100, and I did, and I talked to the CEO about this, and it's just like, look, if I want to step up to CRO for $100 million business, he's making a big bet. And so like I kind of felt his pain there. But on the which one stuck out to me when I was trying to make the call about whether or not I could be successful as a CRO at TeamPay, I was very, very concerned about whether or not retention was high. And so I was a customer. I loved this product. It was so easy for me as an operator, and it was high. So like that one was important to me. The variable that stuck out to me that was a problem was the declining win rates for sales because we were in like the low teens, like even single digits, and the growth rate was going backwards. And so I'm like, okay, something happened here in the market that's going to make this job very challenging for me. And it's true. Like Ramp spun up, Breck spun up, like all these competitors really like started to flood the market. And so you see it all in the data. We did turn that around when I was there, but it was sort of an interim role. So
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's really helpful. I think there's a lot of people that might find value in the types of questions and like the depth of the answers that they're looking for because many people are not, I think, thinking at this level of when they're taking on a job to really truly assess the full risk profile.
And by the way, every time I do this with a CEO, he's very thankful or she's very thankful that we're doing that together because I think they want to know that you are doing diligence on this business, that you're capable of understanding the levers, that you're honest about the levers you think you can pull to improve it or not. And like I said, if retention was an issue at TeamPay, I would have never taken the job because, like I said, there's nothing I can personally do. I can't direct the product. It's not my job. So, by the way, Jason, I'll give you the link to all the questions I do ask after this in case it's helpful.
Oh yeah, as someone that has spent the last decade of my career in the hiring space, I would love to read through that. All right, let's talk more a bit about your kind of marketing and sales philosophy. So when we were going back and forth about this, you mentioned pipeline generation starts the sales cycle. Why did you make it a point to mention that in our prep emails? And is this something you think that a lot of teams get wrong?
I like it's every company I've ever advised, every company I join, there's this like, especially if you have a longer sales cycle, it's just like a very important concept for revenue leaders to just make sure that the pipeline is time adjusted for the sales cycle. and the true sales cycle. Some companies open and close opportunities at the point at which they're dead. But when they open it again and it's ready, it could look like your sales cycle is 30 days, but that actual deal started 4 months ago. Use the true representation of your sales cycle, like start to finish on the conversation with that prospect, and then adjust your pipeline generation for that period of time. So if it's like 90 days, you want to be spending the amount of money you need to generate enough pipeline so that in the Q2, for example, so in Q1, you're generating everything you need for the deals to close in Q2. So it's very tactical, but it's just like the most often overlooked, obvious way to make sure you can get your revenue like back up.
Right. Right. It's one of those things, right, that people always want to look at the rosy picture of. It's like when your bank account's low, you don't want to look at it, but when it's high, you're like, oh, you're
Yeah,
showing it
I'm
off.
rich.
And
Yeah.
right, exactly. And I think it's the same thing that people, and you can see this in all sorts of metrics, whether it's like true CAC or other things, where make sure you're truly taking the full picture if you want to get something that's actually accurate and be able to budget properly in future quarters.
Yeah, I mean, and that's even why I do like cost per opportunity, like fully load that. That includes like T&E and like everything else. It's basically like I would use a cost per opportunity that's non-comp and everything else as comp. So that includes like even the tech stack you have running it. Because if you didn't have all that stuff, anyway, like fully load everything and see and truly just like figure out where you're at. But in particular, the foresight on the pipeline is definitely one. I think that's like very often a problem.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So you've now made this transition from CMO to CRO, and I have it on good authority from our mutual friend Will Evans that you excel at cross-departmental leadership and you can be very motivating in that way.
Oh, he's
So what is there anything that governs your philosophy on getting sales and marketing to work more closely together?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a math problem, right? Like we have a funnel, like we're all aligned that we have like something we need to move to the end, and we should all be highly incentivized to do that. I should be highly incentivized to not give sales shit because I want their time spent on the right kind of stuff. We were kind of just like ruthless about the funnel definitions, like checking in on it, making sure like, and Will tell you this. This is why I was talking about Sam because at Electric we had a slide that had 9 reasons why you should disqualify one of the opportunities that came over. And I'm like, if this doesn't show you that marketing is totally aligned with your, with the pains that you're having, like I don't know what is. So we all agreed that like what quality mean, they had to use Slack or Teams. They had to use Google or Microsoft 360. It had to be a decision maker who was director level, like we just like loaded it up. And I was like, look, okay, if it meets all this, are we agreed that it is a sales accepted opportunity? And they would be like, yes. So then when we were measuring opportunity to close and reps had varying degrees of like rates, we weren't like busting each other's chops around whether or not it's qualified or not. I'm like, stop, we got to get the instrumentation correct so that the measurement can like be informing decisions about rep performance or like just like where we're going to land for the freaking end of the quarter. So had a wonderful head of sales too. Will report into this guy, David Weiner, who I love, still a very good friend of mine to this day. We'll be having lunch or dinner in the city shortly, but he just got it. And we just had like a mutual respect for each other. Like we knew each other's jobs were very hard and we just made it a commitment to make sure that our teams, played nice. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think that sales and marketing speaking the same language, right, is really important, and taking the time to truly define those things. And right, like your MQL definition at one company doesn't have to be the same at the next company. It just has to be the same as the sales team's definition. Right.
exactly. And like I said, then it's just a math. Then we're just doing math. Like now I know how many opportunities of this type I need to drive in. He knows how many he needs to close. We were a great team in that way. But it did like someone like Will though, it does require you to have sales reps who are very clear about what they're willing to accept and believe is their responsibility. They were very open to say like, we have to get better. If you're going to give us this kind of like, we have to do better here. They would take accountability for that. So you just need, people who are just like open-minded and rational.
Yeah, right. Which can be tough when there's a lot of pressure. Any stories come to mind of recent where there was some of that friction between sales and marketing and what you guys did to solve it?
Well, actually, interestingly enough, I do think that there are some updates to how you think about like not only aligning on what quality means, but also I do think intent plays a very big role Like they're not all created equal. While marketing is like, we got you a business that fits all of this criteria, go sell it. But they were like, but they came in because they wanted a Yeti. And I'm like, but we got you the conversation. And they're like, but they're just not ready. No matter what we do, they're not ready. Like their incentive, like just making sure like the incentive with the prospect is also aligned. Like I said, I just bucket it as intent. So I'd say like having a discussion about what qualified is like one thing, but like learning and evolving that thing is also just like a key part of the process. So like anybody can come up with the qualification, but I do think like, there is a balance between like truly how much salesmanship should tip someone who wasn't originally interested over is like sort of where I think the gray area is.
Yeah, I think there's probably, I think more recently there have been marketing teams focused on higher intent leads and figuring out not just, hey, who fits that MQL or SQL, whatever definition you want, but when we look at this cohort down the funnel, what are the attributes that we can find or the correlations we can find for the higher intent leads? Because the simplest way that I've been thinking about sales over the last year or so has been that the pain has to exist and it has to be relevant now. And if it's not relevant now, then even if they have the pain, it's gonna be really hard for them to buy it.
Totally. But the question that I would have for you and others is like, well, then isn't that the value of a sales rep to make sure, like, again, if I'm getting you the right buyer, is whose job is it to convince them that right now is the reason to do it and the pain is so excruciating that like now makes more sense.
Yeah, and I think you're right. That is what a good salesperson or sales team is there for, right? Is to take the people that are not like very obvious candidates to buy right away.
Right. Because
Right.
I'm
It's
like,
the middle ones.
I'm sorry, I'll just put them through a self-service funnel then. Like I don't, if you want like slam dunk straight down the fairways, like that's where like I think tricky conversations can happen with sales and marketing, even if you've like nailed definitions. It's still on you to, I don't know, you got it. Turn them around.
Yeah, exactly, and then that's what sales is there for. Let me ask you too. I think we have some people probably in the audience that are in early stage startups, and I'm curious. Do you find yourself going back to any kind of repeat advice or principles for founders in say like seed, Series A when it comes to their marketing?
Well, the advice is that you'd want to make marketing as predictable as you make sales, right? Like you want the same level of like forecasting and like target versus actual reporting that you do in sales, because I think oftentimes that's like an overlooked piece. It's not like marketing is giving you pipeline reports. Hopefully you're getting those. I really think showing a founder exactly how you expect to get there, I think is like a helpful exercise. And that's when you can talk through like things that have worked or not worked in the past. I also do challenge coming into an organization. If somebody tells me we've tried that doesn't work, I'm like, well, I think I need to break it. I don't think I am all knowing, but I want to really like get to the root cause of why that thing didn't work. And again, for small amounts of money, I would just say like be open to testing things that you feel like may not have worked in the past, because markets could change. When I joined HelpScout, everyone's telling me paid advertising doesn't work. I'm like, well, can I try? Like, can I break it? And what I'm finding is what they meant by paid doesn't work is not that we couldn't drive more businesses in the door. That actually we're able to do. They are not converting to paid at the same rates as organic. And that makes sense to me, because those that come in organic are doing their research, they're spending more time. If you see an ad and you come in, we need to do way more trust building. And I think that is actually something we need to do inside the product. So it's just making sure like you feel like you can get the trust from the CEO or founder to like really like just diagnose root cause things on your own. Try hacky things, like, really just like try to get in and break things before you like truly like write something off would be like the advice.
Yeah, and I think too that concept of in terms of breaking things that hey, I want to experiment on a small level and get build a bit more conviction, yes or no. But I just want to make sure that like give your marketing leaders as an early stage founder some of that leeway or some of that direction to hey, go test something on a small level. Let's start slowly try to build some conviction one way or other. If it's working, we'll double down. If it's not, let's leave it alone and focus on something else.
Like hedge fund manager, like that's exactly how I describe my job, right? The LPs are giving the VCs money. The VCs are giving the CEO money, and the CEO says to you as like the head of marketing, like, here's your marketing budget, or we're working on the budget together. Like you are a capital allocator. You are there to spend money. And I would also say to like founders or first time founders, like just a reminder, like headcount doesn't necessarily generate the demand. Like paid program spend does. And so that was like those are some hard trade-offs you have to make as a leader about where headcount goes. And so just like as a rule of thumb, marketing spend, 60% of that should be in headcount and 40% of it should be in program. And so like if you're spending 95% in headcount and you're not growing, but you have all this spend in marketing, and CEO is like, and the board is like, but you have all this marketing spend. Why aren't you growing? It's like people don't help you grow. They help execute on the things that help you grow. So just, there's just a lot of things around that are, important for founders to kind of like, watch out for.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. That's some great frameworks to think about. And obviously, like those numbers can shift a bit, and it's dangerous to just like repeat those numbers, but it's good ballparks and benchmarks to think about. And I love that concept of, hey, we are capital allocators, and that visual you just painted of how the money flows through from LPs to VC all the way down.
Right. I mean, well, that's how I envision it. Maybe the CEO thinks that he should be spending all the money, but like if that's why you're there, you're going to be spending it.
So I know you're big on planning and forecasting. So can you give us the high level walkthrough of your quarterly and annual planning and forecasting process?
Yeah. So usually like at the end of Q3 or beginning of Q4, you're sitting down with your exec team and you're just talking about like what the next year is. And in some cases, like exec teams, even newer ones are probably not, they may not realize like how much foresight is needed in order to generate revenue, new MRR, for example, in the next year. And especially if you have a 3-month sales cycle, you actually need to start generating the demand in Q4 of 2023, for example. So you already need to like start the planning. I would even say like end of Q2, beginning of Q3, you need to start thinking about it because your next year starts in the quarter of that same year, like you really have to like think about that. But the one thing that I do with the head of sales and usually like the CFO before we go to the CEO is basically to say like, what does our growth plan look like for next year? And how are we diversifying the channels to help us get there? So for example, like are we going to add an SDR team because we want to add, let's just say we're going from first level set with the board and your CEO on how much growth you want to see overall ARR and like from new MRR because new MRR is obviously a contributing factor to total ARR, but it also puts a lot of weight on expansion if you keep that new MRR number low, if that makes sense. So sorry, that's very tactical, but like you need to level set on like just growth in general. Once you decide what the percent of new MRR growth is, we use MRR, so I'll just stick with that instead of ARR. You want to determine which lanes are going to be responsible for that growth. And then next year, I want to add 2 new lanes. I want to make sure that we have a partner integrations that are producing, and I want to make sure we have a reseller lane that's producing. I'm not going to add SDR because it's too costly of a function for us. And I have limitations on what I think I can do from paid and organic. So I'm going to add these 2. So that just starts a whole conversation around, okay, well, if we want these producing by this much and by when, what do we need to hire? Like, what does the infrastructure on RevOps need to be? It's just really like digging in there. And then once you like just set all the goals, you cascade them down to your team in terms of OKRs. And then like, you set all the metrics up and you start measuring them. So it's pretty easy after that. But I think this initial conversation around like the growth rate, what do we want that to be? How much do we want to be spending next year? Do we want to be getting more efficient? Like those are all conversations we are having at HelpScout right now, just to make sure that like we get alignment with the board before we head
Right.
into the year.
Right. And I think that's the planning part is probably where people make the mistake the most. And they don't do it diligently enough or they don't go deep enough because it can be very tedious work to plan out that entire execution path. But it's so much easier to just color by numbers, so to speak, at that point than to try to figure it out later on. And I think the other thing too is in most companies, startups are large, like plans are going to change. And that mindset of like, hey, this is what we're going to plan with, but we're going to have to reforecast at some point based on how things fall, and just continually reminding people of that because that's where you can start to hurt morale if you have to change direction and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah, you want to set like the goalposts, but you're gonna obviously have to reforecast at some point. You're gonna miss or you're gonna like beat or whatever. So it's never gonna be perfect, but you want to get something out there that helps you at least have direction for the org. And like to your point, the bottoms up is really important. Like if I were to just say that we can continue what we're doing and get to 20% new MRR growth, that we're already like failing at that today. So that's kind of the plan, the process.
Yeah, yeah. As you're thinking about planning for 2024 now, are there any lessons or things that keep popping in your head that you're trying to remind yourself of to help shape that plan?
The biggest one, and I've been fortunate to have a wonderful CFO on this, at HelpScout and as a partner in this process. The one that we keep coming back to is we could write anything we want on paper. Like I can say like, yeah, it's like, put 50% growth like on there. The problem companies got into is that a lot of people put big numbers on paper. They hired and spent to that number with no bottoms up plan to really get there, and then they had to roll it all back. They had to fire a lot of people. So this year we're just like being very, very, we're like basically going in with a scalpel and saying like, why don't we actually put much lower rates on here, only spend to that and beat it? And that's a better, I think philosophically, a better way to think about it. Now, are we sandbagging? Like, no, but once we plan spend to it and that spend feels good to us because we're not burning a ton of cash, improving efficiency all around, like that still feels good. Is it going to deliver a growth rate to VCs that they're going to be salivating over? Probably not. But if we can get that predictable and we can achieve it, well, then let's turn it up. That's when we reforecast, So that's kind of our thinking on that.
Yeah, and the paradigm has shifted a bit, I think, both in VC's minds as well, that, hey, it's whether you want to call it default to live or whatever right framework you want to think of, is that, hey, for the next year or two, growth rates will likely slow down, and there might be still a chance for that explosive growth afterwards. But if you guys can continue to grow at some nominal rate in the interim, that's going to be beating a lot of your competition.
And exactly. And like, I think, if you use rule of 40, for example, as your North Star, right? Like that's just basically saying like, are you growing at a rate that feels good relative to spend? And that's a good just checks and balances for the company. So whatever your numbers are, or like whatever those goals are, I would just say, make sure I would say in particular, if I was a CEO running a company, the number one thing I would just be looking for is, can we extend, can we just keep the runway for as long as humanly possible?
Yeah,
Because I think
absolutely.
raising is still a problem.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So speaking of raising and board meetings, I think board meetings are these like mythical things that only a few people get access to. And so I would love to hear your process for preparing for a board meeting. I know you've got some great experience with this going all the way back to the Upserve days. So what is your process these days for preparing for a board meeting?
We have exceptional data at HelpScout. Everything is basically at our fingertips, and most of the board meeting decks are pretty much set. Like the main data, like the main sets of data, right? Like we're just basically copy and pasting the reports for the next month. So I would say like one, if you're new to board meetings or you don't have a cadence set with RevOps yet, to like make sure that like the data collection and capture is like pretty easy so that you can just comment on the insights, get that down, get good measurementation down with RevOps and just get a good system for them to like update that every month. Because it depends every board meeting on so the CEO writes sort of the narrative for what the board meeting should consist of based on like AI is a major topic for customer support, our industry, because there's varying degrees of concern or question marks around how much AI will replace. Our position on that is it's better together, but we need to talk to the board about what our position is on that, how much investment we're making in AI, like how does that change the roadmap? So that was a topic of discussion for this meeting. And then the other topic of discussion was 2024 growth, where I really needed to understand the question I just shared, which is, are you comfortable with 15% growth if all the rest of the economics for the business are good and we're moving towards like profitability? Are you okay with 15% or you really want me to push it? That's a question really only investors who invest in your company can answer. So like a great forum for it. So we go through 10 minutes for each section at the beginning on product and engineering, sales and marketing, which includes for me, customer, basically account management, and then just like a business update. So like the full view. And then we go into discussion topics. So know your business, like prepare like you're going to be in this Vista meeting, know your numbers, in and out, but really just make sure that you can use your board members' time as wisely as possible. They're very smart. They sit on many boards. While they're not operators necessarily, they absolutely can help guide any of like sort of the larger questions you have.
What about in a great board meeting where there's like really good interaction or conversation with the board? Just paint that picture a little bit. Like, how much are they digging into what you guys are saying? What types of questions are they asking? Would love to get a sense of that.
Sure. So it's interesting because like, there's still like humans with varying senses of like interest or care in a particular topic. The
Right.
one discussion topic we had in the last board meeting was just around pricing and packaging around AI. And so we couldn't foresee that, but that's kind of
Right.
like how the conversation ended up, and it ended up being like massively productive because they've seen other companies in pricing and packaging and those kinds of things. And so like I said, discussion is really all centered around the discussion topics you bring to them. And then like, they're just double clicking along the way to help you kind of navigate that.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Let's talk about some stuff from the field, some tactical stuff here for a second. What's the best money your marketing team has spent this year?
Well, until July, we were not spending on marketing. We just had headcount. So that is an interesting statistic. Right now, the best money we're spending is on paid advertising. It's all search related because it's the first channel I turned on because I'm like, there's high intent. Everybody is searching for this thing. I don't think we need to do a lot of pushing of our brand yet. I think we can just capture. And so that's kind of like the first place we went. The second best thing I think we're spending money on is, and as it relates to the work people are doing, is we're going to do a brand refresh. That's going to happen in mid-October. So that's going to be fun and great. And then the third is we have an SEO team that I think is exceptional. And they're trying all kinds of new tactics to really like increase our rankings. So of the money we spend both in people and program, that's probably the order.
Okay. I think, and I may have been on a webinar of sorts with a branding expert. I think mentioned that she was helping you guys with some of the branding refresh stuff.
Really?
Yes, potentially. Well, I don't know unless I got it wrong, unless you're not using someone or she worked with the company in the past.
I don't, like I said, I'm new. So maybe.
Yeah. So I don't want to. I don't. Maybe I shouldn't comment on that. But anyway, she certainly seems very like she knows what's going on in the branding space. So whether it was this brand or a different rebrand, she may have helped you guys out with. But in terms of scrappy things that you guys are doing, is there anything in particular? And it doesn't have to be right now, but the more contemporary, the better. Of hey, like this is a little outside the box.
Two scrappy things that we're doing. Zoom Info has a lot of products that they added on to their like data platform. Two things which are pretty cool. One is very similar product to User Gems, which like sends an email if somebody like changed jobs. So that's like one. It's fully automated, which I love, and they're using Zoom Info. So that we haven't put that on like full blast yet, but that's one I'm very interested in double clicking on. The second is so they're recognizing companies who've been to the site, then they're finding the people at those companies, then we're automatically sending emails to them. Again, that one isn't on full blast, but that's like a product that I love and would love to like get more use out of. And then the last is my paid media manager, Victor, is using, he's trying to use ChatGPT to basically match some of that same Zoom Info data. He's getting the contact information. He's putting it in a Google Sheet. It's drafting the response in a very highly personalized way. And then we're pushing it back to outreach. So that's kind of like a hacky, weird new thing that we're going to try, but we're trying to like embed more of the ChatGPT, like personalization into kind of the comms.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Going back real quick to the intent stuff, that's also through Zoom Info as well.
Yep.
Got it. And curious. So these are people that are showing intent by visiting the site, but didn't necessarily fill out a form.
Well, it's companies. And so, but it's finding the people that work at those companies and say like, hey, basically like wasn't sure it was you or not, but if you're interested, this is what we do.
Got it. That's awesome. I've seen a lot of these companies like them and like I think it's retention.com, like these anonymous, they're able to pick up on the anonymous traffic and help you target it, which I think is probably really useful.
I mean, again, you're showing intent. So like we're trying to just get after it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to ask you a little bit more about yourself a little bit. So in terms of we talked about a few different folks, but who do you see as the most important people or most impactful people that you keep in your tight-knit professional circle?
Sam Jacobs, he's the CEO of Pavilion. I love him. Very long time friend and mentor. Very, very helpful to me in my career and like always great advice. Kyle Lacey, he's CMO of Jellyfish. We do off and on talk about, like, I don't know, some of the things we've been working on. Brad Keim, he's head of revenue at betterment. He is not only great, he's not only a great revenue leader, but we also like to vent to each other about all the nonsense that happens in startup. And then last I would say is gosh, who am I talking to these days? Talk to a bunch of Pavilion members, but what else to say? Brandon. Oh my God, I'm blanking on his last name. Anyway, a bunch of people have like been popping in and out of my circle.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think well, the piece too, like people like get what you're going through and be able to kind of vent with them or like bounce ideas off them. It's really important, I think, to have at least like two or three of those folks that
Yeah,
can
someone to
text really
keep you
easily.
sane.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. One of the other things I want to ask you about, this has really helped shape my kind of North Star personally. And so I'm curious to ask other people this question. But 5 years from now, you have an ideal day, right? How are you spending those 24 hours?
I have just taught a class at Columbia or Princeton, a bunch of college kids who are trying to understand how to navigate like a revenue position or sales and marketing or something like this. I've had 3 cups of coffee. I probably worked out in the morning too. And that's it. And by noon, I'm kind of like just, I'm chilling. I've taught my class for the day and, I can, 5 years from now, I don't know that I'll be retired, but I'd like to be.
Yeah, well, I think it's for me, it was a great forcing function to say, okay, if that's how I want to be spending my time in 5 years, what do I need to do now to get there? And it's like the simplest way I've thought to frame that. And
So true.
I think teaching smart, ambitious people is will always give you more energy as well. So I think that's an awesome ambition to have.
Yeah. I realize also retiring in 5 years is very ambitious, but you said ideal. And so,
Exactly, exactly.
yeah.
All right, wonderful. Last question I love to get people out of here on is what is one lesson or piece of advice that you think about almost every day?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's business related. I mean, it's just simply like, may you live every day of your life. I try not to take the job so seriously. I try to really do spend it like with friends and family. I love a cocktail. I love a vacation. I love going out to eat and good food. So I really do try to work to provide for the things outside of work. So, the jobs can be hard, but, really just trying to put it in perspective. So that's the
Yeah,
piece of advice. Live every day.
yes, live every day. I love it. I was like eighth grade and I saw some quote, it might have been a Yogi Berra thing where it's like, don't worry about life too much. You're not going to survive it anyways. And whenever I get really stressed out, I try that. I'm like, you know what? Like none of this really matters. I'm going to die at some
Exactly.
point and everyone's going to forget about me. So like, it's not that big of a deal. I still stress out about things, but that helps like reset me a little bit.
I do like a daily reset. Also, wine helps. So
Amazing. Amazing. Well, Andrew, thank you so much. This conversation was awesome.
awesome, Jason. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely.